Hey everyone, Casey Irvine here, and I just want to talk to you today a little bit about how the way I work and my workflows have changed from like December last year to, we all kind of acknowledged something happened, with the release of the new Opus models and GPT 5.4 and some of these like new large frontier models and how the way we work. And I just want to like acknowledge that, yeah, definitely as a IC developer at Microsoft, the way I work has significantly changed. We definitely think about things in a different way, and there's a lot of posts kind of plus oneing this idea that there's definitely been a big shift and there's been a leap that's happened recently. And so I just want to kind of talk about what I see personally and around the folks around me, and how they work and how that's changed. So, up until maybe January this year, the way that I would usually work is, would have my terminal and I would maybe go into a directory or repo. Maybe I'd create a branch. Maybe I'd create a work tree. I was using work trees pretty extensively, but before some of this shift happened, so I might say like, hey, let's create a new work tree for like new feature. So I have my shortcuts to create a work tree. So we're going to call this new feature, and there we go. And then I have a shortcut to open up VS Code. So I would open up VS Code, and then yes, I trust the authors. Perfect. Um, and then I would have my chat here, and I have my files here. And so maybe I'd open up a file and start maybe trying to edit some things. Maybe I'd even talk to the Copilot here to just kind of get an idea of what I wanted to do. And the most immersive that I would get is like maybe I would move this into like the editor area, and so now I don't have to have the chat on the sidebar, but here I'm doing this. Um, so that's the way we were working for, or at least the way I was working, and most of my team was working for quite some time. Um, and then around January, we sort of switched to being in Copilot CLI. And there's nothing, I mean, the Copilot CLI is awesome, but there's nothing super special about the CLI itself. It's really more the mind shift that happens. So today I would do the same thing. I would create a work tree, and then I would launch Copilot CLI. I'm gonna have my own little shortcuts. And the magical thing that happens when you get into the CLI is there's no code. Like there's no code to look at here. And so you kind of have no choice but to start from like talking to the CLI. And this is sort of the mindset shift of I'm not going to go in and try to start hand editing things. Like I can only talk to the agent. And this is really what, maybe you don't stay in this realm forever, but like this is or and maybe you're not there all the time, but this is what unlocks that mindset shift, to where you can just talk to these agents, you can just talk to the AI. And quite literally we use handy.computer a lot to just talk to. So I might even say something like, "Hey, Copilot CLI, I want to start contributing to the VS Code repo. Is there a really good like first issue for me to take, and maybe start implementing and just trying that out?" So I'm literally just talking, and I do some things for videos that I wouldn't normally do. I don't always say hi to it. I might just give it some commands, and this is gonna go off and like find an issue for me to work on. And like I never had to open up GitHub to like look to see if there was an issue. I'm not opening up Visual Studio Code to look at the code or like anything like that. Like it's all gonna happen here. Um, and so that kind of brings me into like what does this cycle actually look like? And so I kind of talk about it in these steps, where sometimes you're going to do some research before you do something. And I'm leaving the something to be vague because, as a developer, you tend to think of things like implementing features, fixing bugs, writing code, delivering things, maybe supporting a service. Those are like our sort of day-to-day jobs, but you can use this stuff for so much more. So you're going to research something. Okay, you need some background information. So now you're kind of ready to do something, but you don't want to just jump in. You're going to do some planning. You want to kind of set the guardrails and the structure, and really, for me, part of planning is also sort of defining what this goal is at the end. So it's like you should have a plan, sort of some general guardrails and guidelines of how you want to get there, but then you need to have a clear goal defined. And sometimes we call these like exit criteria, like what are the things that have to be true for this to be done. But you can just think of it as a goal, and then you're going to have the agent execute on that. They're going to go off and do their thing. Sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes it's an hour, depending on how large the task is, and what they need to do, and what they're going to have to do to kind of make progress. Maybe there's some long running builds that has to kick off, like, but it's going to do all of that. Um, I use mine to like stand up Azure resources and do manual testing sometimes. Yeah, definitely kicking off long running builds. I have extensions that will watch cloud builds for me, so that if I have a build in the cloud, the agent can kind of go to sleep for a little bit, not really asleep, but it doesn't do anything until the build finishes and something wakes it up. So that's like a really cool feature that I'll talk about at some point of extensions. And then, this nudge here is this idea that it can kind of come in at any time, but maybe the agent takes a turn and it's finished some work, but you're not quite ready to review it. You thought of something else. Maybe you're like, oh, can you also add this? So you didn't review, but you gave it a little extra nudge. It wasn't that one shot. It's like, oh, I got to tell you to do something a little bit else. Maybe I forgot it, or maybe I see it kind of going off the rails a little bit, so I'm gonna do what's called steering, or maybe I queue up some extra things for it to do. It's just like there's other little things you might do, so that it's not just like, oh, hey, we're always one shotting everything. It's like there's a little bit of massaging that might have to happen. And then at some point you're going to review what the agent did, and this can be like a team code review, sort of like more at the end of when you're ready to submit a pull request, and get it committed into some sort of larger shared team branch. But I do a lot of like local review with my agent, and kind of all of these steps can happen in collaboration with the agent itself. So I will have an agent that reviews the other agent's code, or I'll have like a team of agents that review code. And we might do this at several different steps of whatever the plan is or the process, kind of depending on how I've laid the plan out. And then you can always go back to any one of these things. So maybe I review the code and it just needs a slight little nudge. Maybe I review the code and we have to like execute another phase of the plan. And this could even like be like nudge could be just a form of, hey, I left some comments on the code review. um, or I might have to go all the way back to the plan and say, like, maybe we went off the rails, or maybe there's another part of this that we haven't planned yet. But you do kind of this cycle until you reach your goal. And one thing I do like to do is try to track some of this stuff in, at least like if I'm planning something, I like to have a ticket somewhere associated with that, whether that's, in a GitHub issue, or an ADO work item, like having the plan sort of be represented somewhere, and the progress against that plan at least tracked periodically in a ticketing system, just so that there's one, a human readable history. But then I've also had plenty of instances where other teammates will be working on something and they kind of hit an issue, or they're sort of wondering what the status of something is, and their agents will go actually look at the work items that I've been updating, and can understand the progress that I'm making. um, and and so the larger point here is, like, not only have we just not been really writing code since, for me, since January. Some folks are a little bit later, some folks are a little bit earlier. Like, we're not really writing code on my team, but we're not doing a lot of other things. Like, we're not updating work items ourselves, we're not creating work items ourselves. Like, I use this flow to create and plan like epics or features, and then the output is the sub tickets or sub work items for that feature, that I'm then going to go do this cycle again to implement each of those little subtasks of the feature. So there's a lot of things where we're, not just not coding anymore, we're not filing work items anymore, we're not, updating statuses anymore. We're letting these agents kind of do a lot of this for us, and it's honestly pretty great, because let's be honest, who likes updating work items, and making sure that all the beans are counted? Like, none of us really. So this has been sort of really freeing to just, you stay in this one environment, and you do everything there. What's really cool about Copilot CLI is each one of these phases kind of map to special slash commands that you have, or some version of that. So let's see if I clear this out. So for research, there's the research command, where I can give it a topic and it's going to create a research report. This is super handy. For planning, if I hit Shift Tab, it takes me into plan mode. And you can also use the slash command to put it in plan mode as well, which is pretty cool. And then for execute, I kind of think of that as autopilot. Now, I run with a lot of like auto approve tools all the time anyway. I get that's not everyone's taste. And autopilot has some of that. So you might have to tweak your version of what this part looks like so that it's to your taste. But for me, it's like YOLO on autopilot, like do the thing, and I'll come back later when you're done. And that's like the big like, hey, we're doing this big execute block, now. And then when I'm ready to nudge, I might, just type a command here or a comment if I see it going off the rails, and I come back to it and just check on it. Or I might switch it back into interactive mode to like have some discussion about what happened, what issues it hit, just kind of like that pre-conversation. And then for review, there's two things. You can use this review agent to have it review its own code, to explain the code to you. However you want to do that, this is really super cool. The other thing you can do right in the Copilot CLI is you can open up a diff view. And I have to make a change for this to show up, but you can actually like leave comments right here in the diff view. So maybe if I go make a change, let me get out of this. Let me go make a change in VS Code. And I'm doing that just because it's going to take a little bit too long to like, here, maybe let's put a comment here. Okay. And so now if I do /diff, so again, normally I wouldn't edit the code manually. I would have the agent edit it for me and do its thing. But you can see that I can bring up the diff here so I can see what's changed. And then if I press C, I can actually leave a comment like, is this really necessary? Does it need a comment? I probably should have just spoke to that. I find myself dictating as I type, and it's like, why didn't I just use Handy to just dictate? But now if I go back to the and if I hit enter to submit, sometimes I forget to hit enter. It'll submit all my comments back to the agent, and now the agent is gonna take action on that, which is a super cool flow. If you're like interested in this, but you're like, hey, I'm just not a CLI person, but I'm really interested in this idea of like getting out of the editor, like having this same flow. We also have this new app called Agents. And a lot of times I'll do this just to do like quick code reviews or things where I don't necessarily want to be completely immersed in the CLI. But what's cool about this is it will like set up the work tree for you. And you can connect it to the Copilot CLI. It also has some options for like running in cloud agents. But then you get like a nice GUI experience around this. And this app is really pretty cool. And, you can see it can sync with my CLI session. So here's my CLI session right now. So I can actually open this up and it's now synced to my CLI session, which is pretty cool. But if I start a new session, I can even say something like, hey, let's kind of find a cool new feature of VS Code that nobody's really working on yet. Maybe it's future facing that we could take a look at and try to implement ourselves. And again, just using handy.computer to dictate into things. I love that I just talk to my computer all day. It's a little bit awkward in open space, but we're all kind of learning to get past it. You can see it already put me in plan mode. This little blue box has put me in plan mode, which is pretty cool. So because I'm asking it to look at a work item, so that's something it automatically did for me. And then it's creating a work tree. So it knows that I want to work in work trees so that I can have multiple parallel streams. And that's the other thing is like, as you do this more and more, you're going to find that as I'm waiting for the agents to work on things, I can just start more and more stuff. And something that I'll do quite often is if I have, let's say, nope, this full screen on this is being a little weird. Let me go here. Let's say I have work items like that have dependencies on each other. So maybe I have like a set of work items, but then this work item depends on this one work item depends on this one, and there's like maybe there's some inter things here. What I can do is I can use the CLI, like maybe this can happen independently, but like this has to, I can use the CLI or whatever version of Copilot I want to plan each of these individual work items. ahead of time. So then maybe I need to like go execute this one first because this one, a lot of things block on it or something like that. I can have the plan sort of already uploaded. I can implement it, but then while that's in progress, I can plan these other items that maybe depend on it. So that they're ready to go when that item finishes. So as soon as the pull request merges, I've already got the plan. I already know what I want to do. The plan was aware of the changes I was trying to make before that, like it was going to take a dependency on, and then I just have it execute on that. So I can actually kind of front load a lot of my work. And I will say there is a bit of like you find yourself with a ton of these tabs open sometimes. I'll create another video about it, but I even created my own tool to kind of keep track of that. But with some of the new tools coming out, I sort of abandoned that because yeah, because agents is so cool. Look at this. It's telling me that my session is ready for me to come back and look at. So I get a nice little notification there. So it's asking me about tool approvals because I didn't put it into YOLO mode, which I will now. But it's already sort of started that session for me and is going to go look at some stuff. And I'm just talking and it's going to go do that in the background. So you definitely have this sense of kicking off background work streams a lot more. The other thing I want to talk about, and I don't have a good visual for this, is how our team does code reviews now. Because we definitely see a real boost in our ability to churn out code, and high quality code. I should add. There's a lot of this like vibe coding slop talk that we don't see a lot of that in our team. We do, especially if you have good plans and you're really front loading the plan and you're understanding the goal you're trying to get your agents to get to. They really do, from our perspective, produce some pretty high quality code. You got to be aware of context windows, and how much of that can affect hallucinations and things like that. But for the most part, the context windows now are so big. At least for on our team, they can do most of what we're looking to do without even sweating. Um, so our code reviews, we definitely use agents to assist us with code reviews. So what I'll typically do is, and in fact, maybe I can even prompt this. So let me just go to a new session here. So I might do something like this. Hey, can we find a pull request in the VS Code project that is pretty sizable that maybe isn't getting a lot of reviews? I want you to kind of analyze that, explain to me what it's doing, and then I want you to suggest nothing too super nitpicky, but like high level comments that you would leave. Give it a severity, and then like let's talk through whether we want to actually post those comments or not. Um, so that's a prompt that I use all the time. Something along those lines of like, "Hey, my coworker has a pull request, um, or I need to find a pull request to review. Maybe I don't even want to look at my dashboard to see what's available to pull to review. So I just ask it like, help me understand the code, explain it to me, and then tell me kind of like what you would critique about it, and then I can use my knowledge of the project to say like, oh well, yeah, that comment actually, like I know that's not really a thing, but like maybe I'll see one that's like, oh yeah, that comment's a really good catch. Like let's go ahead and post that. Um, and there may be still some times where I actually go and do kind of look at the code and just sort of sanity check some things. But I'm almost treating code as like we treated assembly in December. Like it's there, it does stuff, it's important, but you're not really going to look at it. And occasionally you can, but you're not really. And I get that that's a little bit of a hyperbolic statement and a bit of an extreme example. Like we definitely still do look at code, but more and more we're trying to ask ourselves like, well, what if we didn't look at the code? And so one of those things that we want to review if we're not really looking at the code is, well, how is this validated? What tests were added, what test cases were added, was there any manual validation that had to be done, were there builds that needed to be run? And with MCPs and all that stuff, the agent can pull all of that context in, so I can ask it, hey, what builds did my teammate run on this change before submitting it for PR? It can go into Azure DevOps and find those builds and tell me about what they did. So it really is this like crazy, just kind of like information gathering, central point. um, Yeah, and so the last thing I want to talk about is, so what does this mean kind of personally? So when I first started kind of doing this, my mind sort of raced, and I've seen a couple other people kind of go through this process too, where you just feel so much more creative. Like I've been a software engineer for 15 years now. And oh, I can't not click the button. So I got to click the button. Um, I've been a software engineer for nearly 15 years now, and personally, I was kind of getting to the point where like your brain can run so much faster than maybe your hands or your schedule can. So I could think and plan whole features in my head or whole like things that I wanted to do, but then just knowing that it's going to take me you know time of just banging things away on the keyboard, and that was getting less and less with some of the chat assistants and all that good stuff. But now it's you can just think the possibilities kind of open up, and things that you might not necessarily think you have time to do or time to investigate, it's really easy to have an agent go spin off and do things. I've definitely done things where I'm like, hey, go do three spikes at once and just take three different approaches and we'll pick which one we like the best. Like definitely done some of that and has real application in my job. So that's the other sort of thing, and part of it is you kind of have to rein that in too, because you're going to get so excited, you're going to get this huge dopamine hit of like, oh man, we can do so many things, and you start kind of like almost chasing the dragon a little bit, and you have to kind of like s- rein yourself in and say like, well, what's actually really important to work on right now, what am I going to get the most bang for my buck, because you can kind of burn yourself out just running in a bunch of different directions. We've definitely seen a lot more productivity. The productivity gains are real. With that sort of comes we kind of run out of easy wins pretty quickly with agents, which is a good thing. But it is sort of an adjustment where all that's left is all the hard problems, the things that maybe you have to think really creatively or you have to kind of dig deep on. And so maybe you would do one of those a sprint, but now it's like that's all that's left. All the easy stuff is just taken care of, which is actually great because the easy stuff is also sort of the toil stuff, the things you didn't have to think too much about. So I definitely feel this sense of like, well, the only thing left on my plate is all these hard problems, which I think is by design. That's a good thing. It's just it is a little bit of a mindset shift of like every day I'm going to be like really in the weeds of trying to solve something that's difficult, versus just like banging out a version bump and testing that, something I could kind of just one hand eat a sandwich and get through. um, and then a lot of our focus is and this is something that we should have done in the first place, it's just AI is kind of I say it's like going from a wooden sword to a lightsaber. Um, it exposes your rough edges where maybe you could accidentally hit yourself with the wooden sword a couple times and you'd be okay, but with a lightsaber you're going to have a bad time. So a lot of what we're having to do is invest in our infrastructure and our CI/CD pipelines, our testing, so that as we run faster, we're not producing slop. We are producing high quality code that we can have high confidence in, so that we can do less review of the code. So if I know that we have really great test cases and we have really great validation in place, and I know that this change is at least going to be solid and not cause regressions, I care less and less about what the code looks like. Other than some major architecture decisions, the little pieces of the code, I don't necessarily care to look at. So we're definitely investing a lot more um, in that, so that the agents can do more and we can have higher confidence in their work. And then I wanted to call out Steve Yege had this AI vampire post, which I thought was so spot on, and he also referenced one of my favorite shows, What We Do in the Shadows, which yeah, is just a great show. But there's a lot of truth to that, in that and not to say that I everything absolutely I agree with it, I want to but it's this idea that, hey, we're seeing this great it, it, um innovation and this explosion in what we're able to do, but it comes at a little bit of a cost, for people and personally, because you feel the pressure to do more because you can do more, and you feel like you're kind of like you have to. There's the FOMO is 20 times worse because you got to be up on all the new techniques and the new technology and the new features that are coming out, and where are things shifting, and how are you driving your team to take advantage of that, making sure you're sort of taking advantage of that and bringing people along with you. So it definitely has felt busier and to some extent more stressful, in a lot of ways more fun and more rewarding too. So I don't want to make it all sound negative, but I do kind of want to acknowledge that there is there's definitely some mental health things you have to be aware of when you're diving into um like this AI boom and just the expectations and all that around it. So, I think some of that's we created for ourselves, but it is. I just want to say it's something to be aware of, and I have definitely experienced some of that and have had to manage it. So, um, I think that's all that I wanted to talk about. Sorry, I know this is a bit of a longer video, but thanks everyone. Happy coding.